Right, hi everybody. Here on another here on Project Next, trying to free the fear and hate out of Indiana and Southern Indiana specifically. Today, we have pretty special guests Matt Gleason, Adam Martinez, co-lead on Yimbiana. We're Indiana housing shortages. What can be done? We can make some change. So, Matt. I'm looking at your website, you say Yimbiana. First of all, we got to talk about what does even Yimby mean. Yimbiana is a new critical space for housing activism in Indiana. You're looking to become, the state is looking to become a crossroads between becoming an economic hub that includes others and becoming a stagnant community with little to no opportunity for growth. Mission instead is to grow, sustain, and build this community. So please, Matt, let us know who you are. Let us know your story.
Sure. So first, the question of what is a YIMBY? It's a play on the term NIMBY, which is not in my backyard. It's kind of a reaction people have when something new or possibly scary is coming to their neighborhood, and people tend to oppose change. And so a YIMBY is yes in my backyard. It's embracing changes that can bring a lot of positive things to your city and your neighborhood. And so Yimbiana is combining Indiana and the YIMBY concept. And so how I got involved is I grew up in Evansville, and I went to Purdue, and then the pandemic hit, and I eventually got a remote job, and I was able to look around for where I want to live. And I found Bloomington, and I really loved it. I moved here and was hit with the expense. It's very expensive, and it's hard to find housing in budget. And so that kind of set me down this path of I'm moving here and probably displacing someone, and I want to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. So that's where I'm at.
Very good. When was this when you moved to Bloomington and started seeing, the effect of you moving there?
2023, and I had a hard time finding a first apartment here, and I ended up moving into student housing that was pretty expensive and not the greatest quality. And so I wanted other options and found that there weren't many.
All right, great. Adam, how about you? How did you get involved in housing advocacy?
So I grew up in rural Southern Indiana, like middle of nowhere. And I came to Bloomington for college in 2018. That was my first time living anywhere resembling a city. So I went to IU for 4 years, got my degree, and decided to stay because I like the city so much. We have, you know, great public amenities, amazing parks, access to nature, bike trails, that kind of thing. After being here for a while, living in an apartment with my partner, I ended up running into a YouTube channel that talks a lot about urbanism, and I saw cities in other parts of the world that were so much livelier and more exciting to be in than anything we really had in the U.S. And I learned why that was. It's all within our control. I learned more or less. It's a very local issue, and because it's a local issue, we can have an outsized impact. And so I decided I wanted to help be part of that impact and help make the change.
Awesome. Yeah, really talking about the power of design here. Anything that a human touches can be designed, and so you can kind of let things go. But if something designed it the way it was, if it's off the tracks, you can also put it back on the tracks. And we talk about that for our country. We talk about for how Congress works, how national politics works. Just because it's off the tracks doesn't mean you can't intervene to put it back on the tracks. So housing can be something very similar. Seems like we're off the tracks a little bit. What is affordable housing anyway? So Matt, how do you even define affordable housing? It seems like a vague term in a lot of ways.
Sure. So we kind of start with what is unaffordable. There's a term rent burdened where if a family is paying 30% or more of their income on housing, and that can be mortgage, homeowners insurance, rent, utilities, all combined. If that's more than 30% of your budget, you are rent burdened. And so we want to make affordable housing under that 30% number for people with their various needs, close to what they need in life. So that's jobs, education, healthcare, and so really making sure everyone has what they need where they need it.
Right. So you're talking, so housing itself being a cost, but you're also saying housing in a place,
Right.
transportation that makes sense, where you have access to the amenities you need, good food, healthcare, clean air, good education for your kids and yourself. So is wrapped up into what affordable housing is. It's not just about the dollars that you put toward the house.
Yep. There's also the factor of transportation, which isn't included in that number. But if what you can afford under 30% is an hour away from your job, you're spending a lot of time and money on transportation. So we like to consider walkability, and short public transit commutes to everything you need as well.
Yeah. And so 30% seems like a nice magic number, a nice clear number. Kind of what happens to someone's life as that number starts to creep above 30%? What's the difference, the tangible difference in someone's life as they're paying more than 30% for their housing?
Yeah, it's not like once you get to 31%, you're doomed. It's over. But above that point, the cost of housing starts to become a burden on your life, and it affects the other parts of your life. So maybe you're able to save less for retirement, for example, or maybe you would like to go out and spend time with your friends, but you just can't afford it. So and these issues sort of compound the more you're spending on housing.
So at about 30%, with the other costs, how they work, we see that people start to not have money to retire in the way that they might. And we're in a crisis here in America where people are working in their retirement, and they retire and then they work a second job that's half time or a quarter time or even full time right now. So, one of the ways sometimes when we look at a problem like retirement, we're looking at the moment of retirement, the days in retirement. How can we change that? How can we subsidize that? How can Social Security be stronger, et cetera? But there's also this idea of the time before that, the putting the investment in making sure that people have the resources that they need to have good finances to retire. I think the same goes for education for one's children, right? Saving for the education for children, because that not only makes a better life for them, but also helps with the American dream, with upward mobility. And so, finding responsible ways to help responsibility, like housing, is a key part of real reform in the U.S. to make a better life for everybody, not just those who are struggling with it. So very cool. So what is it bad out there? Has it always been bad in the U.S.? Was there some magical moment where housing became short, or too expensive, or not affordable? What happened? Are we in a bad spot in comparison to the past, and has it always been this bad?
Right. Yeah, there have been a couple critical moments that led to this, and it has gotten bad. People kind of cite the 70s as when a lot of these factors start coming together, making life more difficult for people. The first kind of step in the wrong direction was strict zoning laws. People call this Euclidean zoning. So the city of Euclid, Ohio, brought a case to the Supreme Court that effectively established strict zoning where apartments are separated from houses, and that's separated from businesses, and that's separated from restaurants and such. And so this kind of has some mixed history of segregation, originally by race, and then it's carried over into a kind of segregation by class that kind of redefined how Americans operate in life. And the second step, I think, in the wrong direction was slashing public housing. I think public housing was kind of hamstrung from the start in the US to where only very particular projects in unpleasant areas were funded and kind of designed into a whole. And they were slashed then because of these reasons people cited by the Faircloth Amendment to the Affordable Housing Act, that basically puts a floor or a ceiling on how much the federal government will fund local public housing.
All right. So there's a couple questions in there to talk about. One with Euclidean zoning, and what you're talking about seems like we're only talking about urban housing. And I know that the two of you focus on Bloomington quite a bit, but we have seen the kind of death of the downtown in small town America as well. Do these kind of changes that we're about to talk about that you're thinking about also apply to small town America, or in where you grew up, Adam? Or I'm here in New Washington. There's 550 people, but there is a small downtown. And the question is, is this just for places like Bloomington, in our district, Jeffersonville, Lawrenceburg, and Seymour, and New Albany, or is it in Bedford, or is it places smaller, like where we grew up?
Yeah, these issues are definitely applicable to smaller towns as well. If you look at villages in Europe that are similar sizes to insert American city, the one I grew up near is called Petersburg, about 2,000 people. The European cities of similar population, they tend to be denser. People live a little bit nearer to each other, and people have a variety of amenities near them because everyone's a little closer together. This means you can walk or bike to a grocery store. You don't have to drive there, even in these small towns, which is, and this, the walkability is really important because, there's been a number of studies showing that walkability, increasing that helps a lot with businesses, especially small businesses, because increased foot traffic is generally, people are more likely to stop by if they're walking by than driving by.
Sure. And many people want to live where there's land, room, etc. One thing as well you stepped on there was about public housing and the way we've treated that in America. I think this is really enlightening, and one of those moments of, oh, when you finally think about it, you realize why have we been treating it this way, where public housing is only for those who have under the poverty level, is where we say. And once you get to that magic number, unlike the 30%, right? Once you get to that number and you get $1 over it, it's done. You don't have access to public housing, and that has a number of problems. And let me see if I can articulate some of them, and you can help me understand if what I'm doing is right and put more color to it. One is that it disincentivizes people to get that extra $1, to have the upward mobility, to actually puts a cap on the American dream in a way, because once you get over that threshold, you are losing access to that public housing. And now, do you really have enough money to put into housing? And the question is probably not. You're probably well over that 30% of your budget number. And so how do you have maybe a graduated rate in which you're losing access? And what do other countries, and it seems like other countries have similar things that have helped people. So let's start there before getting into more questions around it. Explain how that works. What is that magic number? Is there a graduated rate in some places? Who's in charge of this number? Is this a state, city, ordinance, county, national piece? Does the HUD have anything to do with it? Yeah, so there's a lot of questions around there. This, I think, I'd like to spend a little bit of time on to understand, because it's an eye-opening moment.
On the city level, cities have housing authorities that operate public housing, and this is generally that line we're talking about is set by the area median income. And so that's based on everyone in the area. And then saying like 80% of area median income is where that line is. And so if you make $1 more than that, it seems like you pretty quickly lose access. And so one of the options is to make things basically a public option, or what Maryland, County of Maryland is doing is building housing, and the city owns the housing, and then anyone at any income can rent it. And so what this allows people to do is, come back from a hard point in life where they've lost income, they need support, and then they can get back on their feet financially, and then they decide when they move out, what they want to go to next, and they're not kind of ejected as soon as they get back on their feet.
What's the incentive to get out of the public housing if you're getting that housing?
Right. I think the incentive is once you're making enough, you will probably want somewhere nicer. It's quality housing, but at the same time, people always want more than what they've got, and there's a lot of pessimism about social programs that say people are just going to stay on this forever. But if you give people the option and let them move up in the world, they will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, yeah, it sounds like you're resting on a little bit of the American individualism of the drive in Americans to do more, to have more, to do better for themselves and their families. To do that, there is an argument there from many, especially kind of fiscal conservative hawks, etc. Oh, people will not have that drive, and we're just supporting kind of the quote unquote laziness of people. Do you have any thoughts, data, understanding about that being something that's true or not? I'm sure it's true a little somewhere, but tell me what you know about that.
So a big part of this is it's not just the cost of the public housing. You also have to consider what you're getting back from that. Obviously, an important part of this is less people are homeless, which I think that in and of itself is a worthy cause. But if you're purely looking at this from a financial perspective, then offering this housing is keeping people off the street. It's keeping people from being arrested, from going to the hospital more often. And so the net result of this is that you're going to be spending fewer taxpayer dollars and getting a better outcome. So if your primary concern is just taxes, then not building public housing is a bad idea.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's right in line with the way that I try to enlighten and help other people see how I'm thinking, which is the most fiscal conservative thing that we can do is find the places to invest that allow us to pay less taxes in the long run, but also help people. That's real kind of compassionate conservative fiscal conservatism. I think housing is one of those things. As my experience that comes from it, and I know we wrote back and forth a little bit about this, is as an emergency doctor, right? It is super expensive for the taxpayer for me to see homeless people and people who are housing insecure and are looking for a place to stay. The emergency department is the only public 24/7 open place for many people in the United States to find not only health care, but housing, nutrition, and that people come for that much more than they come for, or often more than they come for healthcare itself. And so that is a known fact, and there are a lot of innovative health systems out there, as well as insurance companies that have put their time and money into finding housing for the homeless or those who are going to be evicted soon, so that they can be consolidated in one place where medical service or respite services, but also it's so much less expensive to build that affordable housing for them hotel rooms is less expensive, ton less expensive than having people in the emergency department. And I'll just say this one thing, like insurance companies, especially here in Indiana, the services that we have are the ones who administrate Medicaid, right? So Medicaid is paid to the insurance companies to then be able to pay the hospitals and other things there. And so those insurance provides to keep, and United for one has built into housing, and have tried making that happen too. But there's a lot of stigma around those kind of things, and so opening up that stigma is important. Your experiences with the in Bloomington, where you care about with the how the hospitals and the healthcare system play into all of this in your city in particular.
Did you want to go ahead?
So in Bloomington, we do have a homelessness crisis. There are a lot of people on the streets, especially this is a health crisis over winter where people are at risk of freezing to death. And so a lot of emergency resources are put into um, shelters over winter that are only temporary because of the lack of resources in the long term. And so this is something we spend a lot of money on to kind of treat the symptoms of instead of handling the root of the problem. And something I wanted to add to the public housing discussion, we were talking about fiscal responsibility, so I felt this is important to throw in that Montgomery County, Maryland, the way they're doing this is they own the housing, and so it becomes a public asset that eventually generates revenue. And so they're able to pay off the bonds they took out to build this stuff and then reinvest money in the future. This also allows them to maybe rent out some higher price units, maybe a little nicer, and use that cash to make some units much more affordable so they can cover a mixed use, kind of socially upward neighborhood in one building or one project. And so this is also an asset to that health discussion where people coming out of an ER situation can go right to, a very affordable housing situation that they don't have to worry about losing if their life gets better.
And I'm sorry, which county is this in Maryland? This is
Montgomery County, Maryland.
Montgomery. This is incredible. They, had the progressive thought to do this and showing that the savings can be used somewhere. I mean, it's so logical that you would have savings out of this as an entire county, kind of break a lot of that stigma, and get people behind the idea of affordable housing in their backyard will actually increase the quality of life for everybody, not just the people on the street. Is a big accomplishment. You call yourself YIMBY because you're playing on the words of NIMBY, not in my backyard. There is this. Whether it's a progressive liberal place or a conservative place where there's people with some money and investment in their real estate. And in America, we have an enormous amount of our wealth and our futures, especially our retirement futures, put into people, middle class, and especially have a lot of money put into their real estate to be able to retire, to be able to borrow off of if they need to pay for crises in life or college in life. It's a huge part of the system. And so people are scared often of having their property values go down because it doesn't just mean a loss of a little bit of money. It's a loss of your plans of how you're going to manage your life. And so often there's this kind of immediate reaction of no way, I don't want public housing. It's going to decrease my property values. Is that true? Does it decrease property values? Does it increase? Does it not do much? Do you know much about how those economics work?
It varies a lot. It's pretty, I think, specific to the neighborhood and the area. Uh, I will say, you mentioned the stigma. Sorry, I'm backtracking ever so slightly, but part of the stigma is because of that income cap. So people view public housing as, housing for poor people, but if that was made more universal, the stigma would be lost. There's a quote, I can't remember who it was by, but it was something along the lines of, a rich country is not one where poor people have cars, it's one where rich people take the train. And I think that's the kind of attitude we need going into this. But back to the property values, again, it sort of varies. I will say a lot of mixed use tends to, if you're right along a very popular area, it could bring up property values. It could, if you're adding to smaller units though, those units are worth less to begin with, worth less, in absolute numbers. But it's not one set. There's not a single answer for this, I don't think. Unless Matt, you have any insight?
Yeah. So the main concerns about our policies, and we should probably touch on the free market policies we're interested in as well. But the concerns are usually property values going down. This is something that's kind of a carryover from maybe, I don't want to accuse people of being this way, but there's a history where people wanted to keep certain other people out of their neighborhoods because they brought property values down, and now we see that more as viewing renters or people in more smaller missing middle type housing as rowdy, is a word used often, and we don't think this is the case if you do it right. So something like adding duplexes or maybe a small apartment to a neighborhood is not going to bring housing prices down if it's done right.
Kind of. So let's talk about Bloomington then. Let's get a little deeper into it and have some policy discussion there about what the current policy is and what your plan is. So first of all, I would like to commend you to say that you don't have just the broad strokes. This is kind of the things that we should move toward. What the website is, where you have literally a code by code way of changing the codes out there in Bloomington, and explain each of the whys behind each of those codes. I find that to be amazing. Bring me what you did, where we could find it, but also how long did that take you? How did you do that research? Where did you get the time and money? Did you have to get research help with it? Did you all do it? How did you accomplish such a pretty amazing feat of public service?
So both of us, Adam mentioned, we saw a lot of YouTube videos about other countries and other cities' approaches, and that's how both of us got into walkability, bikeability, public transit, and how housing relates to that. And so using that knowledge, we kind of built up passively over time. We looked at the UDO, which is the Unified Development Ordinance of Bloomington, to see what the problems were. We'd also seen a lot of local news articles of this, housing development was proposed, but it was shot down for this, that, and the other reason. One of the more frustrating ones was a development that would have provided a lot of housing with townhomes and apartments pretty close to downtown, but it was not able to meet a commercial use requirement at the ground floor because it's currently a scrapyard and really no one walks by there, so there's no reason to build a bunch of commercial units there. So that led us to digging in and seeing what can we do to change things? What can we take out so that people can build what makes sense, where it makes sense? And so the main things we saw were these somewhat arbitrary requirements of you must have 50% of the ground floor be commercial space. That's not great because sometimes it doesn't make sense. The biggest one, and this applies to most cities, is that most of the city is zoned for various types of single family housing. So you have R1 through R4, and these are just different sizes of single-family housing. And if I had to guess, it takes up maybe 70% of the map. And so, especially close to downtown, where a lot of people want to live, a lot of people want to walk to their jobs, maybe save some money on transit. You can only have single-family homes for relatively wealthy people. Um, and so our proposed solution is allowing up to quadplexes by right. So anywhere you have a single-family lot, you can make an apartment of 4. It looks pretty much like a normal house, maybe 2 stories, and it reuses existing infrastructure, so you don't have to run any new electricity, no new water, use the same sidewalks and streets, and it can fit right in.
And again, where do we find your plan, your kind of step-by-step plan?
Yimbyana.org. It's YIMBYANA.org. And so we have a couple technical documents that a bunch of us work together on just in our own time, and a few opinion pieces of like more maybe out there unofficial recommendations that we like and we want explored more.
Great. And just to be clear, that's no dash in between the Y and the A of Yimbyana, right? This is
Right.
Yimbyana.org.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Awesome. So, okay, so that's some of the kind of broad strokes things that you would change. What are kind of the themes of what you would change? Give me some more specifics. I know you have line by line specifics, but bringing up kind of medium level, one of the things is allowing for changes in how much commercial space to be on the bottom floor of of housing, and then also allowing for quadplex housing. What else? What are all some very specific things that you think would make some change?
There's the document is very long, the UDO that is. There's a bunch of individual little things that you have to do in order to be allowed to build. A big one is parking minimums. So at any residence or business, the city says you are required to build a certain number of parking spots, no matter what, unless you somehow manage to get zoning variance. And this puts a lot of strain on builders and especially small businesses. For example, if you have a small business downtown where there's a lot of people walking and biking and taking the bus, you may not need those parking spots, and that's just a bit of land that you could use more productively to help you generate more revenue that the city is forcing you to turn into just a concrete parking lot that isn't generating revenue. And that also hurts the city because these parking lots, they're just a drain. They don't actually produce any value. If you look at a 20-acre Walmart, it's going to produce a fraction of the tax revenue that 20 acres of housing and small local businesses will.
Something else specific is mixed use zoning. So like Adam said, housing a local businesses, putting these things together in more close proximity. People are often worried about traffic or noise or whatever. Not to be dismissive of that, but when it's designed in a way that's oriented around walking, you don't get road noise, you don't get parking pileups, and it brings people close to the services and the businesses that they need. So this is things like jobs, small healthcare facilities, grocery stores, childcare facilities, and this is maybe the second biggest crisis in Bloomington in particular, and probably the state, is no one can find childcare at a price that they can handle. Most of the facilities in our city have a wait list, and a lot of facilities cost about the same as your rent to take care of your kid while you're working to pay for all this. So that's something we also target is if we have one wish for our local UDO is to allow childcare facilities anywhere so people can walk their kids to their childcare and then walk to work, drive to work.
Okay. So child facilities everywhere, so you can walk your kids there, or anywhere, I should say. Okay, and right now the UDO blocks that in some way? You can't
Mhm.
just open your childcare facility. There's only, how does it block that? Is it like one per geographic area, or?
So they're not allowed in single family zones. Only like in-home childcare is allowed, which limits the number of kids that you can take care of there. And there's also some, I don't know, odd requirements to have a certain amount of bushes and barriers to get approved to operate a childcare facility. It dictates the breakdown of the coniferous and deciduous shrubs used. So we find this kind of burdensome, right, to build a childcare facility, and people need this stuff. And
Yeah.
if we want to pick our battles of what is important to our city and our society, maybe picking the types of shrubs we use isn't the top priority.
Okay. Okay. All right. And you just did answer one question for me. It seems like if you had to change one thing and you could only change one thing, and they, the council, the mayor, whoever, and tell me who's in charge of the UDO exactly, how change could happen, what needs to happen to change any of these. What are you asking these people for? It sounds like childcare is at the top of that list.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so
Yeah,
explain to
definitely.
me how you get these, how do you get the UDO changed? What has to happen?
So the UDO, I believe, was passed by the council a number of years, like 10 or so years ago. And any amendments to that, it's kind of a long process. The first, it has to go through council, for sure. After that, I believe it goes to the planning commission, and they have to approve it. And then it goes back to council for another vote. So it's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of hoops to jump through. And during this whole process, there's, you know, public meetings, and there's other, the staff gets involved, of course. Usually how it goes is uh, the council will ask for some sort of amendment to do XYZ. The staff will like write up the exact wording on that, and then they'll deliberate that. Then it goes to the plan commission, and then back to council for a final vote.
Mhm. So council can initiate this process, or it can start at the planning commission, and then the council gets that final vote. And so what we do is we talk to council to get them to initiate things. We talk to the planning commission to have them initiate things and write them up. And what our organization is about is getting people out to these meetings that are skewed towards landlords and homeowners that may be worried about you know the rents on their properties dropping if some of these policies get through. Also, kind of have a concern that their property taxes will spike or their property value will go down, and try to talk to them about why we don't think that will be the case if we do it right,
Yeah.
and ask that the city council moves forward on this.
So let me ask you: is it politically popular, unpopular? Is this more an council doesn't want to move on some of these things because they'll kind of lose their jobs if they do? Is it that it's more the bureaucracy makes it a problem, but the council, majority of the council does seem to want to move forward on some of these things? Where's the rub? Where's the red tape?
So council is pretty progressive here, but there is a lot of political tension, and something I mentioned, like the property taxes, is what's usually cited as the biggest concern. And so I want to address that real quick. When the usual upzoning process, and most of what we are about is referred to as upzoning or increasing what can be built. That current process is a builder buys a property and then petitions to have it upzoned, and then they build on it. And so this upzoning is associated with, if it happens, it will be built up. And the concern is often that as soon as your home is upzoned, the evaluation goes up and your property taxes go up. And for someone on fixed income, this is pretty scary. This can be devastating. And so the way we want to approach it is do like broad upzoning that, if I can make a metaphor here, when we have a high cost area, there's a lot of pressure on that housing market. And when you upzone one house or one little neighborhood, all that pressure is flooding into this little place. And so there's a lot more potential here, and we need much more potential. And so those evaluations spike, property taxes go up. What we want to do is broad reform upzoning so that this pressure can be released, gently across everything. And we're hoping to see really no spikes in evaluations because there's equal potential everywhere to build more.
Got it. Anything to add to that, Adam?
Yeah. So in North America, our cities are planned pretty much from the top down, but the top in this case would be the local government. So the local government is telling you what you're allowed to build, where you're allowed to build it. In the past, before modern zoning laws, cities were a lot more dynamic. They didn't stay the way they are. There was a lot of small incremental change done at a very small local level. So we're talking about taking your house and turning it into a duplex, for example. Whenever we have these zoning laws that allow only denser dwellings in specific areas, like Matt said, there's a lot of pressure that forces developers who want to try to soak up all that pent up demand to build the biggest and most expensive thing they can, because that's the only way they can get their money back, because it's so expensive. But if we sort of allow the city to develop naturally at its own pace, that won't happen.
Got it. Okay. And so, shifting gears a little bit, what can we do at the federal level? This seems so local, right? And it's going to be fight by fight, piece by piece, city by city, maybe county by county. How does the federal level get involved in all this?
It's a very local issue. Most zoning laws are pretty local. There are some state laws, it depends on the state, of course. A big thing the federal government can do, in my opinion, is incentives. They can incentivize these kinds of developments. Say, we'll help you fund more public housing if it meets XYZ criteria, or we'll help you fund more construction of your duplexes and townhouses, that sort of thing. And then there's also, going back to the public housing, since the 80s we've been focused a lot more on vouchers rather than publicly owned housing. So individuals go to a private landlord and they will pay 30% of their income in rent, and then the federal government gives money to local housing authorities that pay that landlord the remaining rent. And this is essentially subsidizing landlords rather than building that broad base of housing that we need.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Something else that can be done on the national level is under Biden, I believe, there was the Pro Housing Initiative, which granted city funds for various things in return for improving their zoning laws as they relate to the free market housing. And so this kind of gives cities an extra reason, besides improving their city finances and reliability, to go ahead and do these changes.
Right. And so again, just to get back and clarify that, it gets back to this idea of, wait, we're just going to give money to cities, and we don't have this money yet. We see again that by investing in housing, in the social determinants of our health and wealth, we actually create a lot of upward mobility in people, getting people off the streets, stopping using our emergency departments, lowering our jail rates and recidivism rates, all these things that cost a ton of money. And so it's just very sometimes narrow-sighted to just look at the output of dollars. You have to also look on the return of investment side. That's what a business does. That's what good governments do, is weigh both sides. And that's on the national level, that's a lot of what the CBO does, the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan part of Congress. It does the economics of all this and weighs both sides. And so often you will see, more conservative side of the aisle talk about just the inputs and forget about talking about the outputs. Sometimes you see the more liberal side of the aisle talking about the outputs, but not so much talking about the inputs. My whole platform, my whole kind of reason for running here is to bring some balance to everything, to look at the facts and not live in two different factual worlds that we have in the US right now. And the only way we do that is being truthful about the whole picture, which is a lot of what I think we're doing today. So, last words, last thoughts here, for me, and I'll say one of these thoughts is it's expensive to be unhealthy in this country. It's expensive to be unhoused in this country as well. It's expensive not only for the individual, and it doesn't allow for creation of upward mobility, of wealth, of living the American dream, but it's also expensive for the taxpayer. So we have to think about creating health. We have to think about creating housing. Have to think about creating transportation, even good environment, and clean air, clean water. These things are not just, pie in the sky, nice things to have for people. This is the job of government, is to look for places that we can improve, not only the health and wealth of people in America, but also improve the way that we're spending money. And so housing just falls right into that. So, thank you a lot for what you're doing. Last thoughts, last words, Adam. I'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say for anyone interested, uh, just check out local politics. There's a lot you can do locally. People tend to focus on national politics, which is important, of course, but you have such an influence over what happens in your city or your county. It doesn't even compare. If there's a meeting where they're talking about zoning and you show up and there's 5 people there, you are 20% of the entire input they're going to get. So even doing a little thing like writing to your city councilor goes a long way.
Mhm. Nice. How about you, Matt?
I guess one thought on my mind is that we talk about things like housing, transportation, education, and healthcare as expenses, but we really need to start seeing them as infrastructure that we're investing in to make people more productive, to build really a better society for everyone, where we don't really fear as much how much something costs, but more look at how much we can benefit from it, and make as much as we can universal, so that people in different situations can have access to the things they need, and decide whether or not they need that affordable public option. Um, One example I wanted to bring up would be someone taking care of an extended family that has a high income on paper, but they can't afford to live in their city because they're using most of their income to help people in their lives. And
Mhm.
so something like a public social housing would be great for them. And the needs based, the means tested stuff is what it's typically called, just doesn't account for that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'll leave you with this, which is, first of all, thank you so much for what you're doing. Go to indiana.org. It has incredible amount of information. It also has high level information, so you can get yourself accustomed to these things, and you can follow your socials off of that as well, so that you have a lot of Instagram going on. Um, the other thing I would say is, you're talking about all these ways that we can act locally, and show up to meetings. You could be easily, if there's 5 people at these meetings, be an enormous voice. What you're doing there, um, you know, for for me, this is an aside, but last 2 nights ago, I went to the ISMA meeting, which is the Indiana State Medical Association meeting in my area, and there were about 15 doctors there, your voice is so loud when you show up to one of these things, right? There's many more than 15 doctors in my area, but you're there, all of a sudden you are able to truly affect policy with these leaders. Your opinions, your thoughts, tell them what your experience on the ground is. Politicians, leaders need to know what the experience on the ground is. They know their own experience, and the only way that they learn is by talking to people. So go talk to people, go talk to politicians, especially those who show up. And we do have a problem in this country right now with politicians showing up and keeping that conversation going. But I think that entire city council makes themselves extremely valuable. The other thing is, if you want to do something, run for office and look at local offices. It's so powerful. We just talked a whole bunch, maybe a half an hour content today about what can be done to make change through the local office. There's the federal level, people like myself who think about incentives. These are broad-based incentives, and the whole idea is the broad-based incentive to help local governments do their jobs better, to help state governments, county governments, individual governments. And so there is this national election coming up in about a year and a half. After that, we'll have more local elections. That process starts now. If you're looking to run, come talk to me. I'd love to help you. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If you're looking to do the right thing for people, I'd love to help. So, run for something, do something. That's what people are feeling right now, this desire to do, where people are out there protesting. But there's also this very more surgical thing. It feels surgical, where it's showing up to local meetings in politics, but it's not surgical. It's actually, your voice is huge. It is outsized when you show up to these things. So please do, especially to our politicians who are listening. So thank you to both of you, Matt, Adam. Is there anybody else not on this call that you want to talk about who's been part of this movement, that's done work, that's part of making this possible, wouldn't have happened without them, that you want to mention?
Mm-hmm. I want to shout out to Kyle Davis, who founded our chapter of, so Indiana is a chapter of the National EMB Action, and Kyle Davis was in high school when he started this, so it's really cool that he did that. Shout out to YY On, who's been a big part of our group and helps us gather information. Tim Dwyer, who recently left to work in city government to avoid conflict of interest. He's been really helpful with helping us learn how to, talk to people, because we're both kind of nerds. And so yeah, those are great people. Deborah Meyerson, also great help from the Stronger B-Town organization in town. So
yeah, I really wanted to shout out.
Adam, anyone else that wasn't mentioned?
I wanted to shout out Strong Towns.
So go for it.
Generally.
Sorry.
It's another organization with pretty similar goals to us, I'd say. They have a lot of really good and really digestible content for people. They have a YouTube channel and also a website. If you just look up Strong Towns, you can find it. A ton of great info.
Great. Strong Towns. Here we come. So again, yimbiana.org. Thank you so much, both of you. Have a great day. We'll be signing off.
Thank you.